Has Iron Maiden become a legacy act that succeeds only thanks to its 80s output? Well, today instead of talking about what it feels like, let's take a look at the actual numbers and see whether Iron Maiden's post-reunion output can actually compete with their golden era in terms of being performed live. Here you go. First, let's take a look at the survivors, the rare tracks that actually made it into the rotation for 2 or more tours. And the craziest thing is that since the year 2000, there are actually only 13 of those. And among them is of course the legendary Blood Brothers, the ultimate anthem of the bond between the band and the fans that has been a setlist staple for years, yet of course has not been performed live on the Future Past and the current Run for Your Lives tour. Which, if you think about it, is absolutely understandable. And then you have the tracks that took a leave of absence. Brave New World and Ghost of the Navigator both returned in 2010 for the Final Frontier tour after a rather long break. And The Wicker Man, a massive hit single, in addition to everything, finally also made its comeback during the Legacy of the Beast run. And when we look at the Dance of Death album, 4 tracks managed to break out of the original tour cycle. The title track, Wildest Dreams, No More Lies, and Passchendaele, with all 4 once again being resurrected for the Final Frontier tour in 2011, which also sadly was the last time fans were able to witness Yannick Gerst's legendary dance during the title track. If we talk about the Matter of Life or Death, well, it actually holds a rather unique record. It is the only modern Iron Maiden album that has been performed in its entirety live. However, only 4 songs from it have returned since, with a spot for the most interesting comeback of course being held by Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, which made a blink and you'll miss it return just once on June 9th, 2010 in Dallas, Texas. And the others, like the reincarnation of Benjamin Breek and These Colors Don't Run, also resurfaced briefly in 2010, while the epic For the Greater Good of God became a highlight of the Legacy of the Beast setlist once again. And that brings us to the present era. Senjutsu. Its lead single, The Writing on the Wall, has already been played extensively across both the Legacy and the Future Past tours, and in addition to it, a swooping amount of 6 other tracks have actually been performed live since the album's release, actually already making it one of the most performed live modern Iron Maiden record. By the way guys, super quick, I just simply have to point out that only around 30% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed to this channel, so if you're not one of those, and especially if this is not the first Up the Irons series video you're watching here, I would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing right now. Let's continue building this amazing heavy metal community together.
The ups and downs have been in Iron Maiden.
Rock and roll!
Yes indeed.
And now we enter the one and done territory. And here's the thing, until now the Final Frontier actually remains the least performed live Iron Maiden album. And not just of the modern era, overall. And the craziest thing is that the band's latest studio output, Senjutsu, which, just a reminder, has come out just a couple of years ago, well, the songs from it have actually been performed live nearly twice as much as the ones from the Final Frontier. Already!
Yeah, unbelievable.
And when we talk about the Final Frontier, only 5 tracks out of 10 ever made it to a stage. And to put that in perspective, and just to add a bit more weight to the argument, this is actually the only Iron Maiden album without a single track that has reached the 100 performance mark, despite having some massive hits like the title track and the Grammy-winning El Dorado.
I have lived my life to the full. I have no regrets.
The story is actually quite similar for its successor, The Book of Souls. Well, 7 out of 11 tracks were played live, and 5 of those, including Speed of Light and The Red and the Black, actually surpassed 100 performances. All of them were eventually executed from the setlist once the tour ended. And not a single note of that 92-minute epic has sounded live from the stage since 2017. Then we we have a cluster of the missing singles. As when we talk about A Matter of Life and Death album, 6 tracks from it vanished instantly after the support tour, including the high energy opener and the second single Different World, which was the literal starting point of every concert on that tour. And in all honesty, even Brave New World and Dance of Death, which for the record are 2 of my absolute favorite post-reunion records, also saw some of their second singles buried, with the most tragic case of course being the beautiful Out of the Silent Planet, which despite being a lead single was only performed 4 times during the Brave New World tour, tucked away after the encore and never seen again. The Rainmaker from Dance of Death, which once again is one of my absolute favorite Iron Maiden records, had it slightly better with additional 50 performances live, yet nevertheless it still couldn't find a permanent home in the rotation. And the craziest thing is that if we purely take a look at the numbers, well, Dance of Death alongside The Final Frontier are actually 2 of the albums which are already way behind their latest studio output in terms of the amount of songs being performed live from the stage. Which, if you think about it, is actually pretty crazy. And while Iron Maiden is known for its marathon tours, well, there's actually a surprising amount of songs that have never been touched by a live audience. As I already mentioned, A Matter of Life and Death is an exception to the rule, the only modern album where every single track from Different World to The Legacy has been performed on stage during its dedicated tour. But at the same time, if we take a look at the other 3 guitar albums, well, the list of the unplayed tracks is simply heartbreaking. And we're not talking about some outsiders, we're talking about some absolute fan favorites, like the epic Nomad, or the incredibly atmospheric Thin Line Between Love and Hate from Brave New World, which for many fans remain to be highlights of the band's post-reunion era. And of course, the 2003 Dance of Death album also has its own set of lost classics, including Face in the Sand, Gates of Tomorrow, and Age of Innocence, each of which, in my opinion, do absolutely deserve to be performed live. And if we go further and take a look at the 2010s, we have the most monumental exclusion of all, Empire of the Clouds from the Book of Souls. 18 minutes long, it's a stage production waiting to happen, yet it has never been attempted live. And even The Final Frontier, which, well, many of you actually know, and I know you might hate me for it, but it's actually one of my least favorite Iron Maiden records. But nevertheless, despite it already being underrepresented, I actually do believe it has a couple of hidden gems, including Mother of Mercy and The Man Who Would Be King, as well as the psychedelic Isle of Avalon. The fans would simply go nuts if the band would decide to perform live at some point in the future. Which of course brings us to the most important question of all. Why the flip does this happen?
Why?
So yeah, no matter what anyone may say, I actually truly believe that the 3 guitar era has actually given us an absolutely new level of complexity and some of the finest songwriting in Iron Maiden's entire career. Yes, including their golden years. And I'm not ashamed of admitting it. And yet to this very day, quite a lot of those songs have never been performed live. So why exactly does that happen? And is the situation actually as bad as it may seem? Well, here's where it becomes interesting. Because yes, on one hand, we can simply compare how many songs from A Matter of Life and Death have been performed live since its release, compared to the same amount of years after the release of, well, let's say, The Number of the Beast. But the truth is that that comparison will not be exactly fair. And in order to do that properly, and here's where my economics background is actually kicking in, well, you have to allocate the weighted average. And the truth is that if you actually apply the weighted score on each of the songs that has been released post-reunion, which would take into account how many songs this band already has in its catalog and how many concerts Iron Maiden performed after the release of a given album, you can actually see that some of the post-reunion albums are doing extremely well, with the Brave New World and the Book of Souls actually landing in top 7 of Iron Maiden album list, with the songs from it purely statistically speaking, actually have a higher chance of being performed live than the songs from Killers did before the Run for Your Lives tour. So yeah, although it may naturally seem like Iron Maiden vastly ignore their post-2000 output, in reality it's not exactly so. And for a band that has 17 albums behind its belt, well, I actually have to say that it actually does quite a good job at keeping the new tracks alive. Although, if we're being very honest, I believe that the current Run for Your Lives tour showed Iron Maiden fans why this band simply has to include some of its biggest hits into the setlist every time they go on stage. As let's be honest here, it's not the deep cuts, but rather their biggest hits, like Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight, or The Number of the Beast, or even Fear of the Dark, which I know many of you have heard live so many times that you would easily swap it for pretty much anything else in this band's catalog that drive the mainstream audiences to this band's shows. And it is exactly those songs that eventually allow Iron Maiden to tour massive stadiums, like they do every night of the Run for Your Lives tour. But yeah, the bottom line is, well, there are a lot of songs that this band has written since their reunion that absolutely deserve a spotlight. And if you ask me, well, I would easily swap The Trooper, Number of the Beast, or Fear of the Dark for any of the tracks I mentioned in this video. And a couple of the other ones which I haven't spoke of. Like pretty much any song from the Dance of Death album, which once again, I simply love. But if we're being very honest, well, A, Iron Maiden simply cannot allow themselves to do that on a constant basis if they want to keep touring stadiums. And B, well, this band still does a much better job than 90% of other classic metal acts in keeping their modern sound alive. But nevertheless, at the same time, Steve Harris and Rod Smallwood actually did promise us that some of the songs that this band plays on the Run for Your Lives tour will never sound live from the stage once again, which of course makes us all speculate, and some of us, like myself, hope that maybe, just maybe, one of the band's future tours will actually be dedicated to the band's post-reunion output. And if you ask me, I would actually be all in for it. But what about you? Which songs from Brave New World and onwards would you love to hear live at a concert? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and it will prevail. Slava Ukraini!